Hi, it's Dr. Maggie Perry with Tell Me What You're Proud Of. This is my second session with Larissa, and this month we're talking about preparing for the anxious moment. So today we're going to talk about how to identify triggers and relate to those triggers as you're thinking about what's going to happen in your anxious moments and how to be ready for them. So Larissa, thanks so much for being back on the show.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
So can you tell me a little bit about your triggers? Like what is helpful in terms of how you identify what triggers your anxiety?
Well, actually, a lot of what I've learned at Huddle, hearing other people share their stories has helped me to learn how to recognize it. And whenever I hear the podcast or read the blog, I learn a lot, and also invariably it'll trigger a memory, but I relate to the memory like, oh, now I understand what was going on. I was really anxious at that moment. And sometimes I can even almost relive those feelings, but I recognize it for what it is. And so when I get like that whoosh of anxiety, a lot of times it comes on like my face gets flushed, my ears get red, my skin feels really hot. And it's not so uncomfortable anymore because I recognize it for what it is. It used to be very uncomfortable, and I'm understanding more and more why I would try to avoid it. And that's when I would like to go out and take a walk or a jog, which is a great thing to do, but I used it as a way to kind of settle that feeling or make it go away and get rid of the anxiety, because sometimes I didn't recognize where it was coming from. But now I'm more and more able to recognize, okay, that's my anxiety. I can take a deep breath. Sometimes I just kind of have to, in my mind, step back from it. I don't always do that, but I'm learning to try and just say, okay, is this something that is really urgent? Is it really an emergency? Usually it's not. And it might feel to me like I got to deal with it right now, or a lot of times it'll come like I'm uncomfortable because the other person doesn't see it as an urgent thing. But I'm starting to recognize now that, okay, maybe it really isn't. Whereas before, it would almost make me more uncomfortable if the other person wasn't feeling it, which was most of the time.
Yeah, so you're saying a number of different things that I just really want to highlight. So first off, as you're describing the sensations that occur when you're triggered, I just want to differentiate between internal and external triggers. So an internal trigger can be a sensation, a thought, a feeling, a memory, an urge. So in the case of OCD, it's common for people to have unwanted intrusive thoughts and then get a whoosh of anxiety and the urge to do something in response. That initial unwanted intrusive thought would be your trigger. You could also have an external trigger. So like in the example of, say, a harm intrusion, the external trigger could be a knife, and then the internal trigger could be, what if I stab someone I love? And then that might give you a whoosh. So that's an example where there's both like an external trigger and an internal trigger. And other internal triggers could be something like a memory in the case of PTSD, or also just a general memory, like you're mentioning how somebody telling a story can give you a memory that gives you a feeling. If that feeling or sensations that come with that feeling are uncomfortable to you and difficult to tolerate, you could have anxiety on top of the feelings and sensations, or anxiety as the primary feeling that you're having. Also, external triggers, there's a variety of different types of external triggers that can be predictable, like a car or a flight or a kitchen in the case of those specific fears. But there could also be triggers like when somebody mentions a certain disease, then you start to get anxious, or when you're in an intimate conversation compared to like a conversation with an acquaintance, you might have different reactions. So I say all this because in terms of getting like a mental map of your anxiety and being being ready to prepare to relate to it differently. It's often really important that you have a sense of what might trigger your anxiety in the first place, but your anxiety is as smart as you are. So it's likely that even if you try to make a mental map of what on the outside tends to trigger you and what's on the inside that tends to trigger you, you probably won't perfectly be able to predict exactly what's happening. And there'll be times where the only thing that you can go on is the experience that you're having. So I really appreciate what you're saying, Larissa, that you're starting to pick up on the cues that, like, when you feel urgent or when you feel hot, when your heart starts to race, then those are cues that you're feeling anxious. So even if you didn't pick up exactly on the internal or external cue that led to the anxiety, once you're in the anxiety, then you kind of know what you want to do, which is to slow down, try to observe what's happening, try to allow the sensations to occur, try to get distance from the thoughts as they're happening, and try not to do something to make it worse. And that would be like an avoidance, a compulsion, reassurance seeking, or neutralizing.